Hello, everyone. This is Brighton from 20 Minutes in the Future. It's Anthony Mayfield and Brilliant Noise talking to you about AI and marketing in 2024. How we plan for the unplannable. I mean, by definition, we're going to have a plan at the end, so it won't be unplannable anymore. But let's not worry. That's just semantics. First of all, I just want to thank you very much for coming along to attend this or watching it on catch up if that's what you're doing. We need this. We really need the fact that there are people turning up to hear what we've got to say on this subject in order for us to have a sense of urgency about forcing conclusions and bringing together all of the kind of diffuse research that we're doing at any one time. If we don't have that, then there's a kind of a rolling uncertainty in the industry around the technology that doesn't get resolved. But you're here, and that means that I've got something to say because I had a deadline. So far we've done, this is the third of our 3 webinars. The first 2 were great. What I feel is different today on our third webinar is that we have much more of a sense of what the immediate future holds. I'll be honest, I think like a year ago actually 330 days ago, when ChatGPT kind of unleashed this revolution, we were disconcerted and unsettled. What's coming? Are we too late now? Because we've been looking at AI for a couple of years, but all of a sudden it was in everyone's hands. What's it going to mean for marketing? What's it going to mean for society, for business, for the world? And here we are almost a year on, and I think the answer is that it's coming into focus, that we've maybe spent a year figuring out what's going on. The technology has continued to accelerate, and we're beginning to see applications. We're beginning to get tools that are easier to use, but I don't think we've got a handle on it as organisations yet. And we're going to talk a bit about why that is and how to plan for the next phase, which I think is beginning any minute. So it's taken us almost a year to get here. Let's have a look at what we're doing. So just a reminder, we're Brilliant Noise. We do transformation for brands. We work on innovation, creative breakthrough, and essentially running experiments and working out what's going on at scale. I'm going to tell you what the answer is to the question for this presentation first of all, and that says, how do you plan for the unplannable? Well, there's really 3 steps. You need to set a policy, you need to run experiments, and you need to plan for scale. You need to be planning not for how things are now, but how things are going to be by the end of the year going into 2025. First of all, I want to mention something. I was kind of drawn up short by a newsletter by Casey Newton, the technology journalist, a very respected technology journalist, I think last weekend, when he talked about having an AI researcher demonstrate GPT-4, the premium model of OpenAI's large language model, when that was being demonstrated to him, and he realized how much more powerful it was than GPT-3, GPT 3.5, which is the free version that most of us are using. And he said it was shocking. He didn't realize how far advanced the kind of paid for models were, and had a sense of AI vertigo, as he said, a kind of dizzying feeling. And that's a feeling I'm really familiar with, and the team here at Brilliant Noise are really familiar with, as we go through our daily work and try to apply artificial intelligence to all sorts of tasks, creatively, strategically, innovatively. You get a sense of just how big this is and how huge the potential of the technology is to help us think, to speed up our thinking. And that sense of vertigo also brought home to me with that article from Casey Newton, that there's a gap opening between people who are using these tools on a daily basis and are kind of enthusiasts, I guess, or have found a way to use them, and people who are waiting for them to be approved, waiting for them to be given the go-ahead by their head office or whatever, or not using them for whatever reason. Or people who are not paying for the service are having a very, very different experience. I'm not making a plug for ChatGPT here, although I think it's well worth signing up for, or for Claude, its rival. But if you're not having that experience of the premium models, you're not seeing just how far they've advanced. I'm going to talk a bit about that. First of all, this is probably one of the most used business quotations from a sportsman ever. It's from Wayne Gretzky, who was an ice hockey player. But I'm not quoting it, I'm quoting Dario Amodei, who's the CEO of Anthropic, which is a big rival to ChatGPT. They make the Claude AI model, which is excellent. Not quite as capable as ChatGPT, but really, really good, and good in some different circumstances to ChatGPT. And he said, really, if you're looking at a strategy for next year, which we are on this webinar by definition, you want to not be thinking about what you've got now, but what you're going to have in 2025. And that was a challenge to me, and that was both useful, as in, yes, no, of course, and by the time we've got a strategy in place for what we've got now, it'll all have changed. But also, what on earth does that mean? How can we possibly know what all of these crazy technologies are going to be like in 2025? And how does that translate into writing an actual plan for my marketing team for next year? Well, looking at the trajectory, looking at where things are going, you can get some ideas. And you can get some ideas without having to get into technobabble or getting into the deep technology side of things or learning to code. You can see it. I realised, listening to Dario, that you can see it in the money. So my advice for getting context, and I think this might make sense to peers in organisations as well, and to bosses and to finance directors and things, is, look, you've seen ChatGPT, you've seen what it can do. The free version cost about 4.5 million to build that kind of a model, and about the same for Claude and other AIs in that generation. ChatGPT 4 that came out this year and is hugely better than ChatGPT 3. It cost about $100 million to train that algorithm, that model, to build that piece of technology. So that's several orders, an order of magnitude larger, 20 times the investment in that first one, and it's well worth the investment. Hence the fact that those companies have been given enough venture capital money and enough capital to now build what will be next year $1.5 billion models. So we're going from 100 billion to 1.5 billion. And that's not all going on free ice cream and ping pong tables and things like that. The vast majority of that money for all of these generations of AI is going on computing power to build the system, to train it so that it can learn. So really those numbers, I think that Dario said that buildings and people are an absolutely tiny fraction of that sum. That's money going into computing, going into chips and energy and data centers to build these models. So we're going to be looking at something that's 10 to 15 times more complex at least. And then I guess, these are not numbers that have come from OpenAI, I should be clear. I'm giving approximate numbers based on what Anthropic's saying about what they're going to be building, and based on just extrapolating that out. Then what are we going to be looking at in 2025? Well, either we get to a point where it plateaus out because the models don't have enough data to build, or we're going to be looking at $100 billion models. But anyway, it's getting a lot more powerful. So we want to be thinking about where we're going to be in 2025. Well, that number is useful to get a sense of scale, but it doesn't tell us what we're going to be working with. So this is kind of a way of thinking about it. When ChatGPT came out, as we know, one of the first applications, and still is popularly adopted by school children and students, is do my homework for me. And this is a crude generalization, but I want to give us a sense of scale of what these models are going to be capable of or are capable of. So we've got that homework stage, we've got that write my blog post stage with GPT-3, and then the current generation that you have to pay for, GPT-4, etc., and Claude 100K. We're looking at something that really, as I'm going to explain, you can use to hack your job. You can use techniques and your domain knowledge and your knowledge of how processes work to do things a lot faster. If you learn some basics about how they work, even without becoming an expert prompt engineer, you can save a lot of time. What those billion-dollar models, the next generation are going to do when they come along, whether it's next year or early 2025, is they're going to be much, much more reliable experts. So rather than I can now hack my job using this tool, it's going to be I've now got an expert that I can kind of rely on a lot more in whatever area I want advice on or coaching on. I'm going to be able to get legal advice better. I'm going to be able to get strategic advice, data analysis, all of those sorts of things. We can actually get a lot of those now with GPT-4 in this current generation, but you have to work a bit to get there. 2024 is going to be as simple as talking to an app, which again you can already do, but you hopefully catch my point. 2025, what's the difference in 2025? What these models are going to be doing then is they're going to become your agent. They're going to be taking actions in the real world, as Dario says. They're going to be out there making decisions on your behalf and doing things within the parameters that you give them. So that's where we're heading, and hopefully gives us a sense of scale. If we want to simplify it a little bit more, at the moment we're hacking. We tend to think of hacking as something that only technical experts can do, people who can code, people who can knows the ins and outs of technology. But actually, because the interface is now a chatbot, we can all hack. We can all find a way to do what we're doing faster and better by using these tools. 2024, we're going to see the emergence much, much more of apps where you don't even have to think that. Someone's thought about that for you and they've produced an app, produced a model that's going to run your campaign, help you through the creative process, whatever you want. And 2025, we're kind of thinking more about entities. It's like, oh, actually, I can put together a team of different personas who are going to advise me and help me to produce this, or help my team to be coached and advised through that process. So that's where the puck is going. That's where we need to be thinking through 2024, is what can we do to both get immediate gains from AI, for immediate benefits, and prepare for that future that's coming down the road. That's the shape of it that's beginning to emerge. Now I've got just a little bit of a warning from Tesla, of all people, courtesy of the Elon Musk biography, which I've been reading recently. I came across a story in there about the production of the Model 3 at Tesla, and how some of the new giant factories that they were building for that car in Germany and in the US, they built with an idea of just completely automating them from scratch. And when it got down to actually producing the cars, this didn't work that well. There were all sorts of bottlenecks, despite it having been conceived as a vision of automation. And so what they had to do, what Elon Musk and his team had to do, was go through the factory and find those bottlenecks and work out how humans could do the tasks of robots. So it was literally a de-automation process they had to go through, and a complete back to front to the way that you normally do it. And it's developed, I think, for them a set of principles. Look it up. It's I think they call it the algorithm, Musk's algorithm, of questioning requirements, taking out and simplifying processes, accelerating cycle time. But automation is the last thing on that list. So this is a warning that if you think you can just replace people and replace whole chunks of the marketing process, and somehow it's going to be a lot better, and there will be people selling this solution to you over the next year, whatever it's called, whether it's wrapped up as a big brand product, or whether it's a new challenger or whatever, they'll be saying, just automate the whole thing. It's a seamless solution. It's a one-stop shop. Ever heard that before? Ever been disappointed? Yeah, I thought so. That warning from Tesla is that you need to do the work on the process. You need to think about the complexities of the automation before you can introduce things to speed up parts of it. Otherwise, you're going to hit a major stumbling block. As we said last time, how we're going to change this, how we're going to change in terms of how we think over the next year as well, I just wanted to remind you of this, is we're going to be thinking about how we do better within our frame of reference and knowledge. We're going to be reimagining, applying new frames to that, innovating, and then we're going to be reframing the whole thing, imagining a whole new way of doing things. That's the kind of thing we'll be thinking about in 2025 and when we're planning for that, and we need to be ready for that. I just wanted to give a big hat tip as well, though, to Ethan Mollick, who's a professor of at the Wharton School of Business, University of Pennsylvania, and he is just absolutely fantastic. I think I've mentioned him in these webinars before, but he's talking about the current state of AI helping individuals to become more productive, but not helping organisations as a whole. You see, that maps very nicely to that idea of we're in a hacking phase at the moment, where you have to make a bit of effort to make it work. And that AI doesn't necessarily scale very well. And that really, as you can see, nobody knows how to scale it very well as an applied technology, as something we're doing. And my evidence for this, apart from all sorts of arguments, my evidence with this would be, if this was something people could do, Google would have done it by now, and you'd be able to use AI in your Google Work Suite. And that may be around the corner, but the version that they're selling for $30 a month now on every license is absolutely pitifully bad. So obviously, having the most money and all the best technology in the world doesn't mean that you can do that you can scale it. So that's still something we're going to need to work out how to do. And before you buy any of those one-stop solutions, you're going to be wanting to know that it fits with your process and how you do things. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with a bunch of robots doing things you don't want to do and holding things up in all sorts of ways. One last point here about the idea of hacking is that if we can accept that we're all hackers now, if we want to use AI, and we really should be in our daily work, then we're hackers, and we need to be thinking about how we collect and implement and share different processes. So up on this slide, I've put 3 of our recipes, as we call them at Brilliant Noise, because it's non-technical and not as pretentious as calling it a program or a prompt sequence. But 3 examples, we've got many of them, of ways that AI can help us. One of them is very personal. It's not actually a work thing, and it's a kind of a routine that I built for my kids, both of whom are applying for university, based on the rules for UCAS forms, and based on the kind of feedback and guidance that UCAS and university professors give around personal statements, for them to put in their personal statements and have them critiqued in detail by the AI and give them that feedback. It's not to rewrite them for them because, well, A, that's against the spirit of it, but also it would tend to strip out their personality, which is one of the big sort of steers that you get from those bodies. But it's been incredibly useful to them, and apparently to some other people, because I put it out on the internet and it's being used a lot, to like help you blend all of those things that you want to say in just 4,000 characters, which is what the form allows you to do. So there was that's one. In terms of actually marketing, we've got all sorts of hacks. We're able to produce content very, very quickly. This webinar will be turned into an article and into some talking points directly afterwards. And that is a process which used to take around 12 hours. We looked at the timesheets, tracked it, thought about it, talked to people. About 12 hours to write a good article and a good summary from a transcript, blah, blah, blah. Takes about 2 hours now, start to finish. That's another hack that we've done. Soon that'll be an application. And also, well, for another time, we don't have time today, but we've got this wonderful tool for reverse engineering creative. So we put an ad or we put an audio description of a video spot into this process, and out the other end comes the brief, what the brief would have been, plus it'll tell us all of the points at which the client team and the agency team would have needed to take risks and be bold to create a great piece of creative. So you take something like the Nike Londoners Can't Be Beaten creative that was done by was Widen and Kennedy. Yeah, Widen and Kennedy. John Ronson was one of the producers involved in that. Absolutely amazing, but a real stretch, a real creative stretch. And reverse engineering that was a lot of fun, but we don't have time to go into that right now. But all this hacking does present a challenge. As I might have mentioned before, IBM, who have thousands of staff using their generative AI product, ran a hack day for 20,000 staff, and they ended up with 180,000 app ideas. That creates a challenge. How do you manage all of that? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. First of all, I did start off preparing this presentation. I think we were going to be talking about predictions and issues, and I really wanted to do that. Maybe we'll do that another time, but I'm going to just keep one or two points of the predictions for next year in here. The first one of those is that there's usually about 1.5 gigabytes of agency and consultancy predictions brochures turned into PDFs and put out there. I know that because every year a very helpful person somewhere in the marketing community puts them all together in a folder, and you can go and look at them, or just look at the size of it and go, that's 1.5 gigabytes of predictions that may not be that useful, but I should wade through some of them. My prediction, 80% of them will be written by ChatGPT this year. And yeah, come at me. You won't be able to prove that they weren't. I bet they were. And if they weren't, most of them should be, because they're useless. Anyway, what we all need to do is get on and do a proper PESTLE analysis, proper strategic analysis of all of the elements. We need to acknowledge some really obvious things that are coming out of this and that you're going to see in all of those reports. Like, it's obvious that hyper-personalization is where AI is going to lead because of its ability to republish very quickly, because of that trend that was already happening with atomic content and personalization. It's going to produce a lot of disruption and a lot of opportunities in content production and obviously productivity. But let's get into the practicals of what you can do about it. First thing, you need to set policy. As I said, policy is a combination of having a very clear perspective for your team and organization on what you're going to be doing, and some guardrails to stop people doing any damage. But you need people using it, and you need that policy. All of these things need to be renewed about every 2 to 3 months, I think. The policy, you need to think about running experiments, and we'll get onto that in a moment. And you need to plan for that scale that's going to come. You need to plan for everybody wanting to use this, everybody in your competitors using this technology, and how you're going to manage that just from a governance point of view. In terms of policy, it's not as hard as it looks. It just takes a day or two of, or perhaps even less, of hard thinking, and get it down and get it out. This is the BBC's. It's just 3 principles. There's a lot more words than this, but basically 3 principles that the corporations put out there that is going to guide all of its work with AI. I think that's a useful example, as was the FT's policy that we mentioned in the first webinar that Rula Khalaf put on the front page of the newspaper and on their website. We're going to be transparent about how we use AI. We're going to look at experiments and train everybody in the best practices that we learn. So policy, how do you do it? You set a direction, you create some guidelines, and you allow people to get moving. So if you don't have a policy in place, or you don't have a policy that is allowing that movement at the moment, you need one of those for 2024, non-negotiable. Then you need to run experiments, and this often feels risky. This often feels like, sure, we run experiments, but we're not talking about just trying a few things out and putting in a few award-winning innovation projects that look good but don't really go anywhere. Running experiments is something that is structured. It comes with a lot of challenges, but there are agencies, consultancies, there are people out there with best practices. We are one of them. This is an article from Linda Grattan, the fantastic professor and author of Redesigning Work and the 100-Year Life. She wrote in her column for MIT Sloan recently about the challenges, and said it was a hard recommend for all of her CEO and board level clients that they embark on an experiment program. One executive said to her that they'd created a head of generative AI to moderate and make sense of the hundreds of experiments we have running on any day. So that's what major companies are doing at the moment. They're running experiments, and we need to do that in marketing as well. And that is something that we don't have a great track record on, despite our love of the new and love of innovation. So what we offer in that regard, by the way, a little bit of an ad, why not, is we run workshops to get people up and running with hypotheses, generating and prioritizing ideas, designing experiments and piloting them and scaling them. It's something we've done for Nike, it's something we've done for Asahi, Adidas, many companies. We run a one-day workshop and we get those things moving. We also have the tools and the processes to manage those experiments and manage the knowledge around them at scale so that they're operating on a consistent basis rather than just kind of people trying things out in different parts of the organisation. Really, really important to make sure that they're transparent. Then our last point of the three was planning for scale. And what do we mean by that? Well, we mean that we need to be thinking about governance structures and processes and investment in marketing that is going to build up the capabilities, build up the processes as well for managing this stuff consistently. And there are big reasons why that's very hard in marketing especially. And we need to kind of have programs or cross-functional teams that are going to be able to run that. What sort of things we mean? Well, it's not new stuff. It's things that a lot of people have been doing and are doing. Open innovation labs are things that we've been talking about for the last 10, 15 years. Brilliant Noise has advised on how to set some of these up. It's something we can help with. I point to two examples from clients who have gone ahead very recently and run their own programs with various partners, but one here is from both from the alcohol sector. Actually, I don't know why that is, but they're ahead of the game. So we've got Diageo, always fantastically innovative. They've run an open innovation lab, which means they're taking in ideas from all over the place and assessing them and funding them and taking, getting involved with startups, but also encouraging internal entrepreneurs to get on and do interesting things. And then we've got our client Asahi, who have just done a lot of work with them over the last few years on how to bring boldness into creativity and how to bring digital skills into the organisation. And they've decided now they're going to run an innovation challenge and encourage people from outside to come in and get involved in that and channel those ideas and look at them. That's a big programme. But that's the kind of thing we need to be thinking about and doing to have the practice to be ready for the changes that artificial intelligence will bring. And I'm going to end with a couple of points before we open up for some questions, and that is that really a provocation. I think up until this point we've been talking about abstract. AI is huge, it's coming, it's going to be big, it's here, it's happening, it's moving. And I think that in 2024, table stakes for marketers, for every organisation, but we're just talking about marketing today, I think 10% of your budget should be on innovation, and I think most of that should be going on artificial intelligence. 10% of your total budget should be going on that. And 10% of everything else should be going on integration and optimization, thinking about AI. The reason for that is that you're going to get immediate paybacks. So look at that. One of the bits of data that we have from Ethan Mollick and from others is that productivity can be increased by 20 to 70% on most tasks in knowledge work by introducing AI. So if we're just doing that, then we're going to get back double our investment on of 10% of everything on AI. I think you need that innovation budget all going into this and thinking strategically about how you're going to manage all of these ideas and how you're going to keep the policy going, etc. But you're also going to need a kind of a separate directive that everything from media to influencers to ad sales, all of that needs to have elements of AI in it, and how is it integrating and how are we learning and how are we getting experiments out of that. And actually, of course, if we're talking about 10% of marketing spend, well, marketing generally is about 10% of revenue. It varies from sector to sector, about 8% in FMCG, as much as 20% in technology and technology services firms. But the average is about 10%, and 10% of that should be spent on marketing. So that's 1% of revenue. Just look at the revenue for last year or for this year. Say 1% of that needs to be spent on marketing innovation around artificial intelligence. And I could build up an argument and take it slow on that, but I think I just need to tell it to you straight. If you're not thinking in those areas, then you have to accept that you're going to be playing catch up soon. A big health warning around this is I've been doing marketing innovation 20 years, social media content, mobile, influencers, all of those kind of big changes coming through. We're a marketing transformation firm. We've been working for 12 years. And I think while we're doing straight talk, is marketing innovation has never really got its game together as a whole. And that's because we tend to be trapped in the campaign mindset. And we tend to be desiring change and desiring innovation. But as soon as a hard quarter's hit, funding gets pulled from these programs and people become less bold, and we end up with kind of middle of the road creative, and talent leaves and goes to other industries. We've got to take this really, really seriously, and that's why we're giving you that prescription of get serious and get 10% in on AI immediately at minimum. It'll pay you back really, really quickly, and you'll be ready not to be wiped out in 2025. And we're coming in more or less on time. Thank you so much for listening to all of that, and thank you so much for your promise to turn up, which made me pull this all together and work with my colleagues at Brilliant Noise to pull all of our insights together. Appreciate that that this has been Top Line. It's kind of a summary, it's abridged versions of a lot of the content that we're working on with clients, but it's really great to share it, and I've really valued the feedback from our webinars so far. So we're open to questions. We've got a chat window there. If you need to leave, that's absolutely fine, of course. But if anybody wants to hang around and ask questions, I'm open to doing that. And I've got Roz. No, I don't. I've got Stephanie. Sorry, Fraser's back, by the way. Bit of a fan. Stephanie, do we have any questions?
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to ask this one first because it's the most relevant to what you were just speaking about. So this is from Inspo Hub. How do you see the staffing makeup of the marketing departments and agencies shift in 2024 to react to the increased use of AI in campaign strategy and content creation?
It's a nice simple one to kick us off there. Thanks, Inspo Hub. So I don't think that the staffing should necessarily change a lot, because although we saw someone hiring a head of generative AI, I would think that the best candidate for that job is going to be somebody who's already in the organisation and is a passionate advocate and user for the technology. I think that this is going to need to be introduced into everybody's jobs, and that we're in the first phase that we're in that phase of hacking, we're in that phase of how do we do what we do but better with AI, and there's no reason to start restructuring at that point. I think as we get to the point where we're looking at producing processes, maybe building our own apps to speed up work across the organisation, at that point we might need to think about, okay, so have we got enough people with the right skills to integrate with the technology? How are we working with our CIO or our technology colleagues on this? How are we working with people across the organisation? But if you've got a pretty decent marketing organisation, you should be thinking about basically holding on to those people and upskilling them as fast as possible to give you options in the next phase, in the next phases of change that are coming down the tracks.
Cool. So we've got 2 questions from Ken P. I'm going to ask the most simple one first.
Thank you.
What are the 3 most important things that he should be teaching to his digital marketing students about this?
Thank you, Ken. And Ken's a lecturer at Northampton. And what are the 3 most important things? That's a good question. I think the first thing would be an understanding of the history of AI. That's a very simple thing, but it's like what we talked about in the first webinar in this series was the long phase of scientists, computer scientists using logic and logic systems to build technology, and why that was, and then the machine learning data-led approach, and why in this moment this is different. Because if we understand the history, then what we understand is how early on we are in this phase, and also how many other parallel kind of approaches to generating artificial intelligence there are. All the attention naturally is on generative AI at the moment because there's been a massive breakthrough and it's in all of our hands and it's amazing. But there are other initiatives going on like evolutionary AI, etc. So that kind of global perspective, I think, is really important. I think the second thing to teach students is that nobody knows anything. The old William Goldman quote, "Nobody knows nothing." The people who are making the technologies and the people who have the domain and expertise and power in the industries that are going to be disrupted by this all have opinions and all want to say they know what's going to happen, but we don't. We can judge the trajectory, but we don't know what the destination is. We don't know what some of the way stations are along the way. So everybody who is participating and using and shaping the technology is going to have a role to play in that. So this is wide open, but we can see the shapes emerging. And I think probably the third thing, and I'd probably give a different answer to this on a different day, but probably the third thing is to take an amoral view of it. And I don't mean that from a moral point of view, like standing away from it, but I think there's a lot of confusion and distraction being created around artificial intelligence and the idea of a robot apocalypse and things. This is really, really interesting. We're all in on experimenting and understanding it, but there are really muddled issues here around intellectual property. One of the things we've seen is firms indemnifying anybody using their systems for artificial intelligence against lawsuits by people who feel that their work's been ripped off because the creative, the words or the images are something that ChatGPT has learnt from what they would regard as stolen content. So I think it's really important not to take sides in this, but to look at it and understand it all and then to make judgments. So I think that an amoral position in terms of really understanding what's going on rather than jumping to a kind of a conclusion or position on artificial intelligence. It's complex, we don't know how it's evolving, and while it's really, really exciting, there are pitfalls and there are moral questions around how it's used and why it's used.
Cool. Another question from Ken. Are you aware of any organisations that are already attempting to track tactical marketing communications right through to conversion using AI? And then he's mentioned Salesforce as an example.
Tracking, could you repeat the question, Your Honour?
Are you aware of any organisations that are attempting to track tactical marketing communications through to conversion using AI?
I would think that that's something that most organisations have probably got someone trying to do at the moment. I'm not sure how useful it will be for them, but I think it will probably be really interesting to learn from that. One of the things about AI that's really amazing from a kind of what will be possible with this is that it removes some of the limitations. The large language models, especially the most advanced ones and the ones that are just about to arrive, they help us think further and faster than we could. And that means that we can understand complexity in a way that we weren't able to before. And I think a lot of the problems that we see in organisations are caused by siloed thinking, the fact that you kind of have a human urge to belong to a tribe, and maybe that tribe's called accounting, or maybe that tribe's called paid media, and you take on views that are skewed around that and feel like you're somehow in opposition to other parts of the organisation. I won't over-explain it because we know that silos exist. Because silos exist, there are few people who have a real clear picture of how everything joins up. And I think that if we can use artificial intelligence to put the pieces together and understand what the flow of a tactical piece of content is through the production, through to the customer, how much it cost, what effect it has, whether there are smarter ways to do it, I think that will be possible because of AI. And I think that complexity is something that we'll be able to see more clearly where the joins are, where the seams are, that were always promised to us that there is a seamless solution and this will work fine, but we kind of need to understand where the seams are and how they interact and how we can solve for them. And I think that's actually all we've got time for today. So I'm going to wrap up there and just thank everyone for turning up and for questions. And do get in touch with us, hello@brilliantnoise.com. And we also have a newsletter at bnedition.substack.com where you can get regular updates from us and promo codes for premium webinars as well. Thank you very much. I hope this was useful. Please do send feedback.